Now, the US President Donald Trump has urged his administration to seek a much tougher version of his controversial travel ban proposal following a weekend attack in London. Now, Mr. Trump is also pressing for an expedited judicial review by the nation's top court. Last week, Mr. Trump's legal team asked the top court to allow his controversial March 6th executive order to take effect immediately, despite being blocked several times by lower courts. Now, the order blocks citizens of 6 predominantly Muslim countries, that's Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria and Yemen, from entering the United States. The Supreme Court rarely does grant emergency requests. Mr. Trump has said his proposed ban, which was a centerpiece of his 2016 presidential campaign, is necessary to protect Americans from terrorist attacks. Critics, however, assailed the ban as discriminatory and that his reasoning behind it is critically flawed. Let's dig deep into the details of this particular incident. Nathan King joins us now live from Washington, D.C. with more data on this. Nathan, the Supreme Court, an interesting institution. What reasons would they have to not take this case?
Well, they would let the lower courts decide. They may think that the legal arguments have already played out in the Federal Appeals Court process and not take it. They may think that it's a very important example of executive power, executive privilege, and will take it. It really is up to them.
Indeed. There's an interesting element to the ruling that came out in late May. The 10 judges who upheld the ban pointing to Mr. Trump's own statements on the campaign trail on his Twitter account as one of the reasons they arrived at that judgment. Why is it that the judges did not limit themselves specifically to the text of the executive order?
Well, remember that we had Sally Yates, who was the Deputy Attorney General, a holdover from the Obama administration, who was fired by Donald Trump after she actually refused to back let's call it the travel ban or the restrictions from mostly Muslim countries. And she laid out arguments that she thought it was unconstitutional. She also thought, because of those statements made not just by Mr. Trump, but also surrogates like Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City, that it was essentially a Muslim ban. And she used examples going back to the civil rights era, saying that people weren't necessarily didn't say they were segregating schools. They were just playing with a bureaucracy when they were doing that. That they weren't trying to deny voting rights, that just made it very difficult for people to register to vote. And she thought there was a smack of this basically when it came to this travel ban as well, not calling it a travel ban, but actually essentially that's what it was, a Muslim travel ban. And what's quite funny, if you have got a weird sense of humor, I suppose, is that now Donald Trump's tweets over the last 24 hours are calling it a travel ban. So his lawyers had argued everything that was said in the campaign, everything that was said was as surrogates shouldn't count. But now he's president and he's tweeting about it, and the case could go before the Supreme Court, and he's actually saying we should have a tougher one as well, not the politically correct one. What does politically correct mean? Does that mean it's really a Muslim ban after all? We don't know the mind of the president, but his lawyers really can't but hope that he stops tweeting about this.
Indeed, and of course his opponents will probably look at this as a gift that just keeps on giving. One last question for you. When is the earliest that this case can actually go to the Supreme Court? And why would the Justice Department, despite all the factors you've mentioned, be confident of winning?
Good question. Supreme Court can take up a case at any time it wants, and I think it could do that very quickly, considering where it is in the case. That's if they decide to take it. They may think that the Federal Appeals Court process has run its course and may strike it down. There is another ruling, by the way, expected in that, so they may be waiting for that as well. There are several theories as to why to push on. One, saving face. The fact that they said to Trump voters that they were going to do this on the campaign trail, and it was one of the first executive orders, although remember that was 7 countries, including Iraq. Now it's been amended to 6. Maybe they want to push it through. There is also another theory swirling around here in Washington, is that Donald Trump doesn't really want it. He's had lots of pushback about it and maybe trying to sabotage it himself. We have no proof, but if you were going to try and sabotage your own executive order, this might be a good way of going about it.
Indeed, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. It's a fascinating story. Thank you for that. That's Nathan King, of course, live in Washington, D.C. And of course, whatever does come out of the Supreme Court, if they do take it up, you'll find out right here first.